Welcome back. Today I want to begin to talk about the polyvagal theory. And if you've listened to Stephen Porges, maybe it's very difficult to understand. He's coming from a neurological background, which is a little bit hard to follow. So we're going to take it down to the brass tacks and wrap our noodles around this amazing theory coming to us from just recently in the 1990s. This just came out and it's getting used more and more, especially by therapists. The polyvagal theory is so exciting because understanding the polyvagal theory can help us immensely in understanding ourselves, our own psychology, and how we relate to the world around us. It's really revolutionary, so let's get into it. So I had heard some talks about the polyvagal theory, and I thought, well, this sounds interesting, and I would really like to understand how this applies to meditation. So I got Mr. Stephen Porges' book, his unabridged book, and poured myself through it. I read some pretty difficult books, and this one, figured it was going to take me forever to pull it apart. So then I saw he had published another book which he had written for therapists. So I bought that book and poured myself through it. The language that he uses makes it very difficult to decipher exactly what he's trying to tell you. A friend of mine once told me that you become a professor by making your theories unintelligible. And Stephen Porges, bless your heart, I'm sure that wasn't your intent, but those two books are very difficult to read to try and actually understand what it's all about. Anyway, thankfully, a therapist wrote a book on the theory. Her name is Deb Donna, and she wrote The Polyvagal Theory in Therapy, Engaging the Rhythm of Regulation. So this is a great book because it brings it down to the parts which are actionable, puts the theory in simple terms. So the polyvagal theory, in essence, is very simple. Stephen Porges was a neuroscientist, and he was dissatisfied with the fight and flight maxim, right? That something happens and we either run or we stay and fight. And he said, that's not really what's going on all the time. So this theory is outdated and underclassed, and it's not meeting up correctly with reality, what we're seeing. And so he went back to the drawing board and he developed this theory that our nervous system is an evolutionary product. So, by the way, did you know that Darwin went out to prove that the Bible was correct? That's something a lot of Christians don't realize. People say, I'm against evolution, and they don't understand that Darwin actually tried to prove that there was a intelligence behind creation. So evolution, the very idea is that there is intelligence in the universe. So we see in the organs that they pile one on top of the other, doing different functions, and they seem to be an evolutionary product. One builds on the other. And the brain looks the same way. We have all these little parts, and then on top we have more and more, and then we have our large gray matter on the top. And it seems to be an evolutionary product. And the primary nervous system is the same, according to Stephen Porges. He says, first of all, the primary nerve is the dorsal vagal nerve. And you see this in lizards. I live here in California, we have lots of lizards that go around, and if you surprise a lizard, the first thing it does is it freezes, right? You don't see me, I'm not here, right? That's the first reaction of the lizard in danger. So when I think of the dorsal vagal nerve, I think of a lizard. So that's our primary response to a threat. We freeze. And if something happens and you freeze, then you know that you are activating, you're using the dorsal vagal nerve. Now, on top of that is the next step in evolution. We are no longer lizards, we're now roaming animals, right? When danger comes, when a dangerous situation happens, we either run or we fight. So now you have fight and flight, right? So that's the next step. So now, instead of just freezing where we're still in danger, we're mobilizing, right? We're getting up and we're moving, we're in action, we're running or we're fighting. It's very, very aggressive and active, both of those acts. And that's the next step in evolution, and that's what we see. That's the mammalian response to fight or to flee. Now, built on top of all of this are neural connections, which are in the front of the body, which are myelinated. That means that they are made to process information very, very fast. And all of those connections come up and they go right into the face. And these are social connections. When I smile to you and you feel something from me, we have connected this social network together. We have made a connection between us. So it's actually a second parasympathetic system. So the first system, the dorsal vagal nerve, where we freeze, that's a parasympathetic response. And it will, if there's a large injury in the body, it will freeze the body and slow the body down to slow the blood flow so that hopefully we can survive until we can get help. And that's what's happening when you see somebody faint. They had a shock and their body shuts down in order to conserve energy and hopefully save their lives. So that's a parasympathetic response. Then the fight and flight response is a sympathetic system. It's a sympathetic response. And now Stephen Porges is telling us that we have a second parasympathetic system, which is in the front of the body. It's the ventral vagal nerve system. It's myelinated for speed, and it comes right up into the face. Like I said, this is also a parasympathetic system. So now we have two. We have a theory now with two parasympathetic systems. Very different, but still both parasympathetic systems. Whatever happens to us in our social, emotional state, it comes right up into the face and you can see it. So someone who has left this nerve, who is no longer being social, who has retreated into fight or flight, you can see it in their face. Or if they've retreated even farther into the dorsal parasympathetic and they're in a freeze mode, then they just look like they're not there, right? They just leave the building. So this theory has caught on so well because the therapists have found so much use for this theory, especially when it comes to war veterans who are returning from the Middle East and they're dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder because they're not in fight or flight and they're not socializing, they are in freeze. And so the therapist, to get them out of this, will get them into, first of all, the sympathetic system so that they can mobilize, right? Because they're so, in a negative way, they are frozen, right? So the therapist will first help them to mobilize, get up, get out, fight, do something, right? Go for a run, whatever it is, but mobilize. Let's get you mobile before we try and figure anything out. Let's just mobilize. And then second, they can begin to socialize. But to do all of this, the therapist has to make sure that they feel safe, that they are not judged, and that they are in a caring environment. And the therapist communicates all of that through the ventral vagal nerve in the face. That's where they give them all the signals of safety and acceptance. So the polyvagal theory is really fascinating. It's a very new theory. So as it applies to meditation, nobody gets it. Nobody understands the polyvagal theory as it applies to meditation, but you and me now, because we're going to go through it in more and more depth. I've heard many times that anger covers sadness. When somebody's angry, really it's just a cover for a deep sadness. They're covering up this deep sadness. They're afraid to come back to that deep sadness, this past hurt that they have. And so they cover it up with anger. So anger is very superficial, while sadness is a little bit deeper, right? If we're talking about something which is sad, we're having a deeper conversation than if we're just shouting at each other. So I've heard that many times, and what's beautiful about the polyvagal theory is it actually explains that in terms of your nervous system. If we are mobilized in anger, then we are in the sympathetic system. That's the mammalian second system, right? And we are in fight or flight, right? If we can let that go and come into a calm state and talk about what we're really sad about, what is the primary cause behind this anger, what's the real issue, right? We can see that it's something we're holding with the dorsal vagal nerve. It's a sadness, it's a past hurt that we're holding on, and if we come down to that level and release it and let it go, we can heal all of that sadness and all of that anger. We can reset the system into a more natural, clean state. So that's really exciting. It's really exciting that, first of all, this wisdom I know to be true because I've used it so many times, and second of all, that we can actually have an understanding of how that works thanks to Stephen Porges and his beautiful polyvagal theory. Now, the therapists love this theory, and like I said, it's just with us since the 1990s when Stephen Porges released this theory. In terms of neurological theories, it's a very new theory, and not everything is fleshed out. So the next step for the polyvagal theory is to have it integrate with the heart rate variability theories and meditative theories. That's going to revolutionize the polyvagal theory. It's going to take it to the next step. Because the therapist worked with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, they see the freeze response as a bad thing. And so they want to get the patient into the social nerve, the ventral vagal nerve, which is very, very understandable and very necessary. I have a life, I have a daughter, I'm talking to you guys. I use the ventral vagal nerve all the time. I gotta use it when I drive, when I go to the store, when I go to the bank. These are all times to use the ventral vagal nerve, right? So life isn't one-sided. And in the same way, the dorsal vagal nerve is not your enemy. In fact, it is your very, very best friend. If you look at the dorsal vagal nerve, you can see very clearly it is the only one that goes straight into the medulla. So when we freeze in a negative way, of course it's not good. And if you're in a depressed state, meditation at that point, at that moment, may not be the answer for you. The answer might be to get up and go for a jog and activate the sympathetic system by going for a short, easy jog. And then, once you feel active, once you've worked out some of that pent up energy in the system, once you've run it out, right? you'll feel a release. And then you're ready to sit down and meditate using the dorsal vagal nerve. Because freeze is not always bad. When you see a newborn baby, you go, oh. When you see a glorious sunset, you go, oh. And when you reach that aha moment, when you come to a deep understanding that you have wanted to come to, and it dawns on you, you realize it, you go, oh, and you stop everything. You freeze in that moment. And my friends, that glorious freeze with the sunset, with the baby, with the aha moment, they are the magic of the dorsal vagal nerve. So like I said, this is just an introduction. I just want to start helping us wrap our noodles around the polyvagal theory. And thank you so much. Thank you so much to Stephen Porges, first of all, for your glorious theory, and second of all, to Deb Donna, who put it in practical terms for me. Thank you so much. I'm going to have all those books linked down below, so if you want to check those out, I recommend it, especially the book by Deb Donna. It's very readable. But like I said, because it's a new theory, because the therapists have just begun working with it, they see freeze is bad and socialize is good. And within the context of their therapy, they are correct. But when it comes to meditation, they actually have it upside down. And isn't that fascinating? So, but they're gonna get there because it's a new theory, and we're gonna help them along into the next evolution of the glorious polyvagal theory. Thanks guys, take care. Thanks guys, thanks for sticking around. Be sure to hit that bell so you get notified next time I have a video coming up. And if you like this video, you might also like this video. And this video. Alright, I'll see you guys next time.